And this is Charlie High with High Society Aftercare and Consulting. You're watching the High Side channel, and I have attorney Sam Gray here, and we're discussing estate planning. And right now, keep in mind that, as Sam was just saying, the laws in different states vary. So if you move to another state, you want to make sure that your documents are in order. So that might be one of the first things you need to do if you do move to another state. But Sam, in reference to living wills again, can you have two healthcare power of attorneys, or do you just need one?
Or do you need either a living will or both?
Yeah, what if the family or a parent has two children and can't decide on which one I want to be my healthcare power of attorney, so I'm going to have both of them make the decision.
Okay, so there's two different schools of thought on that. You can appoint as many healthcare powers of attorney as you want. They can't all make the decision, but what you can do is, I'm going to use mine as an example. I appoint my wife's my healthcare power of attorney in case something bad happens to me. She's there to make my decisions. If she can't be reached or she don't want to do it, if she's dead, whatever the case may be, then it's my parents. And if I do either or both my parents. So it's my parents don't have to be, and which brings us to what happens if you appoint more than one. So if it's my parents, if they're up to bat, so to speak, then that means that either or both of them can make the decision. So it can be unanimous, or it can just be one of them can override the other. Because or just if one of them can be reached. So if they can get my mom but not my dad, then my mom has full authority to make any decisions in case my dad can't be reached, whatever the case may be. So if you want to appoint more than one person to be a healthcare power of attorney, I generally recommend people use the either or both language and have your attorney draft it that way, because there's always that possibility of what if they don't agree. And I have a lot of clients who I tell don't do that, and then what happens is they appoint somebody and guess what, they disagree. There's one person's going to say, oh no, we can't pull the plug, he might live. Other person's saying, let's let him go, he's suffering. And with that's going to become quite a bit of conflict. Ultimately, when you do reach a decision, those people are going to be at each other's throats kind of forever. That's going to be or it'll be, you killed my mom, I can never talk to you again, whatever the case may be. So I always tell people, usually pick one, but if you just can't decide between one or both of your children or however many you have, typically appoint two of them and say either or both, saying either one of them can make the decision themselves or both of them can do it together. But I always caution people about appointing more than one at a time like that. But you can have backups, and I strongly encourage people to have backups, because inevitably somebody can't be reached, whatever the case may be. Somebody could have died before you, or they just say, you know what, I don't want to do it. I can't make this decision. It's too hard. I can't do that. I want somebody else. I defer to somebody else. So, but I always tell people, be careful if you want to make it a unanimous decision between two or three people. That's just kind of asking for trouble most of the time.
Right. And certainly we could probably what if all day as far as different family situations. But one in particular I wanted to run by you as far as a married couple. But can that couple designate someone else to be their healthcare power of attorney, even though they're married? Does that override the marriage decision?
Yes, it can. So and I'm going to use myself as an example a lot because it's a little less grim than thinking about whoever I'm talking to as an example. So if I let's say I appoint my wife my healthcare power of attorney, or I don't appoint my wife as my healthcare power of attorney, but I just appoint my brother, and I am in need of health care, and my wife doesn't want it, my brother does. My brother gets to override her because he has a healthcare power of attorney. So even if you are married, or if it's your child or whatever the case may be, your healthcare power of attorney is always going to be able to override them. They can raise Cain all they want, but there's only so much they can do. Ultimately, the healthcare power of attorney or the power of attorney has the call. It's their decision at that point. So even if it's not your spouse, they still get to override them.
Wow.
That's a good question.
Wow. So upon completion of a living will or healthcare power of attorney, what do we need to do with those documents?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked me that. So typically there's two things you need to do that are very important. So the first one, or three things actually. First thing you need to do is record it. So with the living will and with the healthcare power of attorney, you record that with the Secretary of State's office, and it costs $10 to file it online. Generally, my office does it. I think it's $12.50 because we have to cover postage because it's a pretty big package. So it's like $12.50 a document, and then what they do is they file it. It's stored in an electronic database, and it's technically public record. But in order to access it, you have to have a username and a password that's complete gobbledygook. Nobody can guess it. And that way it protects your privacy, so nobody can just go, hey, let's go see who Charlie High appointed as his power of attorney, because that's private. So what they can do is the Secretary of State will mail them a card. It's about the size of a business card. And I always tell people to laminate it because it's kind of flimsy. And you keep it with your insurance card in case you get a call saying, hey, such and so's in the hospital. We need a decision from you. You're the healthcare power of attorney. You can access the document. Or when the scenario where I see it happen a lot is somebody has to get the ambulance called. They're being rushed to the hospital. Most sane people don't think, quick, let me grab my legal documents. They think, let's follow my loved one to the hospital.
Right.
When they get there, they think, oh no, I forgot my healthcare power of attorney, the living will for him at the house, and I don't have it. But what you can do is you can go back behind the desk. Everybody's got a computer these days at the hospitals. You hand them that card and they'll print you out a copy. Wow. And I honestly, would rather you do that more than take your original, because they're going to poke two holes in it in your file and it's going to stay there. So that I kind of don't even bother carrying it with me. I just keep those cards and you're good to go. And I highly recommend you do that. Now, the next two things you want to do with the original, I always tell people to keep the original and their will with their important papers. So it needs to go in the same place where you keep your Social Security card, your passport, if you have one, your birth certificate, marriage license, things like that. It's supposed to be found among your important papers is what the law uses. Mm-hmm. So I always tell people keep it in a safe and let people know where it is too. Tell whoever you appointed, say, hey, it's in the fireproof box up underneath in my closet up underneath my shoes, or it's in the gun safe in the garage, or it's somewhere like that. Where I tell people do not keep it as in a safety deposit box at a bank. A lot of people want to put it there, but that's a bad idea because the bank's only open from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. And if you need it outside those hours, which most people do, you can't get to it, especially with the will. And the third thing you're going to want to do is make sure you give copies to the people who you appoint. So if you appoint Tom, Dick, and Harry as your healthcare power of attorney, you make sure all three of those folks have a copy in addition to the card so that they can access it if need be.
Right. Should you get their consent ahead of time before you appoint them?
I would. Most people, especially loved ones or relatives, aren't going to mind. But it's just kind of that's just kind of more of a courtesy. It's kind of like when you appoint somebody to be the guardian of a child. If you die, you always want to ask them first to make sure could they accommodate it. And you mean the worst case scenario? Gosh, no, I can't afford to raise another kid. That you need to make sure you okay it with them, or them go, I don't want to make that decision for you. I have a lot of people whose I'm on their healthcare power of attorney because they've got no family around, they have nobody alive, so I'm actually a couple people's healthcare power of attorney, and my boss is on several. So as she said, the longer you practice, the more likely that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So with that power of attorney, let's say my healthcare power of attorney passes away. Mm-hmm. We need to be aware of the fact that it needs to be changed. Mm-hmm. So do you recommend a regular check-in with your own situation?
Yes. You're reading my mind here. So the next thing you should always do with any estate planning document is review it. And I always tell people to review it once a year. It could be your birthday. It can be Groundhog's Day. It can be March 5th. It can be any day you want it to be. You just take it out of wherever you're keeping it, the safe place. Look at it, read it carefully, make sure it still does what you want it to. Mm-hmm. If it looks good, it does what you need it to. Put it back in the box, forget about it. If you pull it out and go, well, gosh, John Brown here, who I appointed as my healthcare power of attorney, died a couple months ago, I better change that. Even typically, if you have a well-drafted one, you'll have a backup, but you may think, I don't know if I want these backups I have. I had them on there kind of as a last resort. Right. I don't want to keep them on there, whatever the case may be. So I always tell people, review it, think it over. There could be a choice you made on your healthcare power of attorney. you could have gotten on there and said, I want to be an organ donor, and then you think, what, maybe I don't. That's why you review. It's very important to do that sort of thing.